"Step away from the dog, sir, or I'm calling animal control right now." The security officer's hand hovered over his radio, his jaw tight with frustration. For the 5th time that week, the German Shepherd had returned to Terminal C, positioning himself beside Gate 7B like a sentry who refused to abandon his post. For the 5th time, travelers complained. For the 5th time, airport staff tried to coax him away with food, with leashes, with gentle words that dissolved into the recycled air. And for the 5th time, the dog named Titan simply sat there, unmoving, his amber eyes fixed on the arrival gate, as if he could will a specific person into existence. But this time was different. When Officer Raymond Morrison reached for the dog's collar, Titan did something he'd never done before. He growled, low and warning, then snapped at the air near Raymond's wrist. Not a bite, not quite, but close enough to draw gasps from the small crowd that had gathered, close enough to cross a line. You saw that. The officer stepped back, reaching for his radio. That's aggressive behavior. "I don't have a choice anymore." Before he could make the call, Titan bolted. Not toward the exit, as everyone expected, but deeper into the terminal. His nails clicked against polished floors as he ran past Starbucks, past Hudson News, past families embracing their returning loved ones. He stopped abruptly at a section of wall most people walked by without noticing, a memorial plaque dedicated to fallen service members. The dog pressed his nose against one photograph. Then he sat, and he howled. It was not the howl of an animal. It was the sound of grief given voice, raw and ancient and utterly human in its desperation. Travelers stopped mid-stride. Children clutched their parents' hands. A woman in a Navy uniform touched her chest and closed her eyes. Raymond Morrison had worked airport security for 17 years. He'd seen marriage proposals and tearful reunions, deportations and final goodbyes. He'd learned to recognize when something was ordinary trouble and when it was something else entirely. This was something else. He approached slowly, hands visible, voice soft. "Easy now. Easy. What are you trying to tell us?" Titan looked at him with eyes that held too much understanding for an animal. Then he moved again, this time to Gate 7B, where he'd been keeping vigil. He stopped beside a bench, pawed at the space beneath it, and looked back at Raymond with unmistakable intention. When Raymond crouched down and looked under the bench, his breath caught. Tucked far back, nearly invisible among discarded newspapers and forgotten charging cables, was a military-issue backpack. Tan canvas, worn at the edges, with a name stenciled across the top in faded black letters. SGT-J Chen. Raymond's hand trembled slightly as he pulled the bag into the light. The weight of it felt significant, though he couldn't say why. Around him, the terminal continued its endless cycle of departures and arrivals, but in this small pocket of space, time seemed to hold its breath. "Don't open it yet." The voice came from behind him, a woman in her 50s wearing a volunteer badge, and an expression that suggested she'd seen too much of the world's sharp edges. "TSA protocol. You need to call it in first." Raymond knew she was right, but as he looked at Titan, at the way the dog sat perfectly still now, his mission apparently complete, he felt the pull of something larger than protocol. Inside that bag was an answer. And Titan had been waiting 2 weeks to deliver it. The question was whether they'd understand it in time. 14 days earlier, Titan had appeared at the airport alone, not lost, the way stray dogs typically are, wandering, confused, searching for familiar scents. Titan walked through the automatic doors of Terminal C with the purposeful stride of someone who knew exactly where he was going. He wore a collar with military tags that rattled with each step, and he carried himself with the disciplined bearing of a working dog, though no handler walked beside him. Airport staff noticed him immediately. A dog his size, unaccompanied, was impossible to miss. But when they approached, ready to call animal control, something stopped them. Maybe it was the way he sat calmly in the corner near Gate 7B, bothering no one. Maybe it was the medal attached to his collar, a service ribbon that suggested this animal had earned his right to be here. Or maybe it was simply the look in his eyes, which held a clarity of purpose that made grown adults hesitate before interfering. Elena Vasquez, who managed Terminal C operations, made the first call. She contacted the number on Titan's tags, which connected her to Fort Bragg's K9 unit. The conversation was brief and unhelpful. Sergeant Chen's dog had been honorably discharged 6 months ago after his handler's final tour ended. The military no longer had jurisdiction. If the dog was causing problems, she should contact local animal control. But Titan wasn't causing problems. He simply existed in that space, day after day, waiting. Elena started leaving food and water near his corner. Other staff members did the same. A custodian named Marcus brought a blanket from his car, draping it over the bench to give Titan shade from the harsh terminal lights. Travelers began to notice him too. Some took photos. Others knelt beside him, speaking softly, asking questions the dog couldn't answer. "Where's your owner, buddy?" A businessman in a wrinkled suit had stopped, setting down his briefcase. "You waiting for someone?" Titan's only response was to keep watching the arrival gate, as if the answer would walk through at any moment. By day 4, Titan had become a fixture. By day 7, he had a following on social media. Travelers posting updates, speculating about his story, sharing theories about why he refused to leave. By day 10, a local news crew arrived, filming a segment about the loyal dog keeping vigil at the airport. But it was day 14 when everything changed, when Titan's patience finally broke. When he realized that waiting wasn't enough, that he needed to make them understand. That was the day he led them to the backpack. Raymond Morrison sat in the airport security office, the military backpack on the table between him and Elena Vasquez. Titan lay at his feet, calm now that his burden had been shared. Through the office window, they could see Terminal C continuing its endless rhythm, oblivious to the small drama unfolding in this fluorescent-lit room. "We need to open it." Elena's voice was quiet but firm. "Whatever's in there, that dog risked everything to show us. We owe it to him to look." Raymond had already called TSA. They'd scanned the bag, no explosives, no weapons, nothing that posed an immediate threat. But something inside registered as paper, lots of it, and what appeared to be a sealed container of some kind. Protocol said they should wait for the police. Protocol said they should track down Sergeant Chen's next of kin and let them handle it. But Protocol hadn't spent 14 days watching a dog slowly waste away while keeping watch over a gate, and Protocol didn't have to look into Titan's eyes and see the weight of a mission unfulfilled. Raymond unzipped the bag. Inside, carefully packed and protected in waterproof pouches, were several items. A folder containing what appeared to be medical records. A smaller bag of dog food, precisely portioned into daily servings. 14 of them, Raymond counted. A photograph of a young man in army fatigues, crouching beside Titan in front of this very gate, his smile genuine, but his eyes carrying shadows that the camera couldn't quite hide. And a letter, sealed in a military envelope, addressed in neat handwriting. To whoever Titan brings this to. Raymond's hands weren't quite steady as he opened it. Elena moved closer, reading over his shoulder. The handwriting was careful, controlled. The kind of penmanship that came from forcing your hand to be calm when everything inside you was chaos. The letter began simply. "My name is Jonathan Chen. If you're reading this, it means I failed to complete my final mission. It also means Titan succeeded in his." Raymond felt something cold settle in his chest. The letter continued, and with each paragraph, the shape of a tragedy began to emerge. Jonathan Chen, 3 tours in Afghanistan, multiple commendations, honorable discharge 6 months ago, return to civilian life, apartment in Riverside, job at a warehouse that paid the bills but hollowed out his days, nights that stretched into dawns, sleepless and haunted by memories that wouldn't fade. And Titan, his constant companion, the only living thing that understood what the silence meant. I've tried. The handwriting became less steady here, as if the writer's control was slipping. I've tried therapy, medication, support groups. I've tried pretending I'm fine. I've tried believing it might get better, but the weight doesn't lift. It just keeps pressing down, day after day, until breathing feels like work I'm too tired to do. Elena made a sound, soft and wounded. Raymond kept reading. I'm writing this letter because I don't want Titan to be alone when it's over. I'm writing it because maybe, if someone finds this, they'll understand that I didn't make this decision lightly. And I'm writing it because I need you to know something important. If Titan brought you this letter, it means I'm still alive. Raymond stopped breathing. The words on the page blurred slightly as his hands began to shake. I gave Titan one mission. If I'm not back in 14 days, go to the airport. Go to Gate 7B, where we first reunited after my last deployment. Wait there. Don't leave until someone notices. Don't leave until someone asks why. And when they finally pay attention, show them the bag. Because here's what I realized, sitting in that cabin in the mountains with a bottle of pills and a plan to make everything stop. I couldn't do it while Titan was watching. I couldn't make him witness that. So I gave him a command. Go home, wait 2 hours, then go to the airport. Follow the route we practiced, complete the mission. And then I sat there, alone, ready to end it. But I couldn't. Not because I suddenly felt hope, not because the pain lifted, but because I kept thinking about Titan sitting at that gate, waiting for someone to find this letter, waiting for someone to care enough to ask why. And I realized that if I went through with it, I'd be giving him an impossible mission. I'd be asking him to bring help for someone who was already gone. I couldn't do that to him. So I'm giving myself the same timeline I gave Titan. 14 days. If no one comes, if no one finds this letter, if Titan waits at that gate and nobody understands what he's trying to say, then I'll know. I'll know that even this last attempt to reach out failed. But if you're reading this, it means someone noticed. Someone cared. Someone took the time to ask why a dog wouldn't leave his post. And if that's true, then maybe I was wrong. Maybe there are people who would notice if I disappeared. Maybe I'm not as invisible as I feel. The medical records in this bag are from the VA. The cabin address is written on the back of the photo. I'll be there waiting for 14 days from the date on this letter. If you're reading this on day 14 or before, please come. Please send someone. I don't know if I can save myself, but I gave Titan a mission, and he deserves to complete it successfully. If you're reading this after day 14, then I'm sorry. I tried. Titan tried. Sometimes that's not enough. The letter was dated exactly 14 days ago. Raymond looked at the clock on the wall. It was 6:47 p.m. They'd found the letter with hours to spare, but not many. He grabbed his phone, already dialing 911, as Elena pulled up maps on her computer, searching for the cabin location written on the back of the photograph. Titan stood up, his ears forward, his entire body alert with understanding. His mission wasn't over. Not yet. But the mountain range where Jonathan Chen had gone to die was 4 hours away, and night was falling fast. The helicopter's rotors beat against the darkening sky like a mechanical heartbeat, urgent and relentless. Raymond Morrison had never expected to find himself in a search and rescue operation, but when he'd called 911 and explained the situation, things had moved quickly. Too many veterans lost. Too many families destroyed by battles that didn't end when the soldiers came home. The local sheriff's department had protocols for this. What they didn't have protocols for was bringing a dog on the rescue mission. That animal is not trained for search and rescue. The lead deputy, a weathered man named Carson, stood beside the helicopter with his arms crossed. He's a liability. Raymond looked down at Titan, who sat perfectly still beside him, every muscle coiled with readiness. The dog had barely eaten in 14 days, had worn himself thin with waiting, but now that action was finally happening, he seemed to gather strength from purpose itself. He knows Jonathan's scent better than any of us. Raymond's voice was steady, though his heart hammered against his ribs. And if we're going into those mountains in the dark, we need every advantage we can get. Elena had come too, refusing to be left behind. She'd printed the medical records, highlighted the parts about Jonathan's training in wilderness survival, his knowledge of the terrain from training exercises years ago. He wouldn't be easy to find, even with coordinates. The cabin area covered several square miles of dense forest. Carson looked at Titan for a long moment, then at the darkening sky, then back at Raymond. Fine. But if that dog slows us down, he won't. The helicopter lifted off as the last light bled from the western sky. Below them, the city gave way to suburbs, then farmland, then the dark mass of mountains rising like sleeping giants against the horizon. Raymond kept one hand on Titan's collar, feeling the dog's body vibrate with anticipation. Somehow Titan knew. Somehow he understood that this mechanical bird was carrying them toward the conclusion of his mission. The pilot's voice crackled through the headsets. Cabin should be about 10 minutes out. Ground team is mobilizing, but they're still 30 minutes behind us. We'll have to start the search with what we've got. What they had was 3 deputies, 1 airport security officer, 1 terminal manager, and a dog who'd waited 14 days for someone to listen. Elena leaned close to Raymond, shouting over the rotor noise. What if we're too late? What if he... We're not too late. Raymond surprised himself with the certainty in his voice. Titan brought us that letter on day 14 for a reason. He knew it was the last possible moment. Dogs don't understand calendars, but they understand time. Jonathan trained him well. The helicopter descended into a clearing near the cabin coordinates, its searchlight cutting through the darkness like a blade. The moment the skids touched ground, Titan was moving. Raymond barely kept hold of the leash as the dog leaped from the helicopter and immediately began working the air, his nose testing the wind for a scent he'd been separated from for 2 weeks. There. Carson pointed his flashlight at a structure barely visible through the trees. A hunting cabin, small and dark. No lights, no smoke from the chimney. Could be abandoned, or could be occupied by someone who doesn't want to be found. They approached carefully, boots crunching on pine needles, flashlights cutting arcs through the darkness. Titan pulled forward, no longer waiting for commands, operating on something deeper than training. The cabin door was unlocked. It swung open with a creak that seemed too loud in the mountain silence. The beam of Carson's flashlight swept across the interior. A single room, sparsely furnished. A table with an empty pill bottle. A sleeping bag in the corner. And there, barely visible in the shadows, a figure sitting against the far wall. Jonathan Chen looked up at the light, his face gaunt and unshaven, his eyes hollow with exhaustion. He didn't seem surprised to see them. He seemed resigned, as if he'd been waiting for this moment without quite believing it would come. Titan broke free from Raymond's grip and crossed the cabin in 3 bounds. He didn't jump on Jonathan, didn't bark or whine. He simply pressed his body against his handler's chest and stayed there, solid and warm and absolutely certain. And Jonathan Chen, veteran of 3 tours, survivor of battles that had left scars no one could see, wrapped his arms around his dog, and finally broke. You came. His voice was barely a whisper, rough with disuse and emotion. He actually did it. He brought you. Carson was already on his radio calling for the medical team. Elena stood in the doorway, tears streaming down her face. Raymond moved closer, crouching down so he was at eye level with Jonathan. Titan waited at Gate 7B for 14 days, never left his post, never gave up. We found your letter about 2 hours ago. Jonathan's hands were buried in Titan's fur, holding on as if the dog was the only thing keeping him anchored to the earth. 2 hours. His laugh was hollow, broken. 2 hours before I ran out of time. You gave yourself 14 days. Raymond's voice was gentle but firm. Titan gave you 14 days. We're here now. That's what matters. But Jonathan was shaking his head, his face contorted with a pain that had nothing to do with physical injury. You don't understand. I couldn't do it. I sat here for 14 days with those pills, and I couldn't take them. Not because I wanted to live, because I was afraid Titan would fail. I was afraid no one would understand what he was trying to tell them. I was afraid I'd die and he'd spend the rest of his life waiting at that gate for nothing. So you're saying Titan saved your life? Elena's voice came from the doorway, thick with emotion. Jonathan looked up at her, then at Raymond, then at Carson and the other deputies who were carefully not staring at this raw moment of human vulnerability. I'm saying I'm a coward. I couldn't save myself. I couldn't even end myself. I just sat here, paralyzed, waiting for time to make the decision for me. No. Raymond's voice cut through the darkness with unexpected force. You're saying you gave yourself a chance. You created a scenario where someone might care enough to come looking. That's not cowardice. That's the bravest thing I've ever heard. The medical team arrived, their voices and equipment creating a bustle of activity in the small cabin. But Jonathan wouldn't let go of Titan, and Titan wouldn't move from his side, so they worked around both of them, checking vitals, asking questions, preparing for transport. As they lifted Jonathan onto the stretcher, he gripped Raymond's arm with surprising strength. The letter. It said things I couldn't say out loud. Things about why I know. Raymond covered Jonathan's hand with his own. And I need you to know something. You're not invisible. Not anymore. Titan made sure of that. 3 months later, Raymond Morrison walked through Terminal C with a coffee in one hand and a sense of purpose that surprised him. Airport security had always been a job, steady and predictable, a way to pay bills and pass time. But something had shifted the night they'd brought Jonathan Chen down from those mountains. Raymond had seen what paying attention could do. He'd seen how one person noticing could mean the difference between a life saved and a tragedy that would never make headlines. He'd started volunteering with a veterans organization. Just a few hours a week, nothing fancy. Mostly he listened. Mostly he paid attention. It was harder than his job and it paid nothing, but it felt like something that mattered. Gate 7B looked different now, though nothing physical had changed. The same seats, the same arrival board, the same endless stream of travelers coming and going. But Raymond couldn't pass this spot without remembering Titan's vigil, without thinking about the weight of what had almost been lost. A familiar bark pulled him from his thoughts. Jonathan Chen stood near the memorial wall, Titan at his side wearing a vest that identified him as a certified therapy dog. Jonathan looked different too, still thin, still carrying shadows in his eyes, but standing straighter now. Living, not just surviving. They'd kept in touch after that night. Raymond had visited Jonathan in the treatment facility, then the halfway house, then the small apartment where Jonathan was slowly rebuilding something that resembled a life. Elena had helped Jonathan get into a better VA program. Carson had connected him with a veterans group that met weekly. It wasn't a miracle cure. Jonathan still had hard days, still struggled with nights that stretched too long and memories that wouldn't fade. But he was here. That counted for something. "You working today?" Jonathan asked, scratching behind Titan's ears. "Just finished my shift." Raymond knelt down to greet Titan, who leaned into his hand with the contented sigh of a dog whose mission was complete. "What about you?" Jonathan looked at the arrival gate, at the travelers embracing their returning loved ones, at the small memorial plaque that had started everything. "Bringing Titan to do therapy work. There's a soldier coming in today, discharged last week. His family asked if we could be here when he lands. They're worried about him. He's not talking much, not sleeping. They don't know how to help. And you do?" Jonathan's smile was small but genuine. "No, but Titan does. And sometimes that's enough to start." They stood together in companionable silence, watching the arrival board update, watching travelers rush past with their rolling suitcases and their pressed faces. Most of them would never know about the letter hidden in a backpack, about the 2-week vigil, about the life saved in a dark cabin on the 14th day. But Raymond knew. And Jonathan knew. And Titan, lying peacefully at their feet, knew. Some missions didn't end when the war was over. Some battles were fought in airport terminals and mountain cabins, in the space between giving up and asking for help, in the faithful vigil of a dog who refused to accept that waiting was meaningless. The arrival gate opened. A young man in rumpled fatigues walked through, his steps hesitant, his eyes scanning the crowd without quite focusing on anyone. His family rushed forward, embracing him with tears and laughter and desperate relief. But Raymond saw what they couldn't. The way the young soldier's body was rigid, the way his smile didn't reach his eyes, the way he looked like someone going through the motions of a reunion while being absent from the moment itself. Jonathan saw it too. He moved forward with Titan, not rushing, not forcing, just being present. The young soldier's eyes found the dog first, then Jonathan's face, then the therapy vest that marked Titan as someone who understood. "Welcome home." Jonathan's voice was quiet, meant only for the soldier. "The family can wait a minute if you need. Sometimes coming home is the hardest part." The young soldier looked at him for a long moment, something shifting behind his eyes. Recognition, maybe, or just the relief of being seen by someone who understood what the silence meant. "Yeah." His voice cracked slightly. "Yeah, it is." Jonathan gestured to a quiet corner away from the crowd. "Titan and I will be around for a while if you want to talk. Or not talk. Either works." As they walked away together, the soldier's family watching with worried but hopeful faces, Raymond felt something settle in his chest. Not resolution exactly, not a neat ending to a complicated story, but a continuation. A next chapter. Elena joined him, appearing from wherever she'd been managing terminal operations. She followed his gaze to where Jonathan and the young soldier sat against the wall, Titan stretched across both their laps, a bridge between two people who understood what it meant to survive something that left marks no one else could see. "Think he'll be okay?" she asked. Raymond watched as Jonathan handed the young soldier a card, probably the veterans group number or the crisis line, or both. Watched as Titan pressed closer, offering the kind of comfort that didn't require words. "I think he's got a better chance than he did an hour ago." Raymond sipped his coffee. Sometimes that's all you can ask for. They stood there a while longer, two people who'd learned that paying attention mattered, that small acts of noticing could ripple outward in ways impossible to predict. The terminal continued its endless rhythm around them, thousands of stories intersecting and diverging, most of them invisible unless someone took the time to look. But Raymond was looking now. Elena was looking. Jonathan had learned to look, both at himself and at others who carried similar weight. And Titan, faithful Titan, continued his mission. Not the one he'd been trained for in the military, and not the desperate vigil that had saved his handler's life. This was a different kind of service now, quieter but no less important. The mission of being present, of paying attention, of refusing to accept that anyone was invisible, that anyone's pain was too heavy to be shared. As the afternoon light streamed through Terminal C's massive windows, casting long shadows across the polished floors, Raymond Morrison walked back toward the security checkpoint. He had a shift tomorrow, and a meeting with the veterans group tomorrow night. He had a life that looked ordinary from the outside, but felt different on the inside, weighted with purpose that hadn't been there before. Behind him, Gate 7B continued its daily dance of hellos and goodbyes, of returns and departures. And in the corner, a soldier and his dog helped another soldier remember that coming home didn't have to mean facing the silence alone. Some stories didn't end. They just kept unfolding, one small act of courage at a time, one moment of connection in the endless flow of strangers passing through. And sometimes, if you paid attention, you got to be part of that unfolding. Sometimes, that was enough.